It is that time again. You're out in your garden getting ready to prepare your soil for your plants. On the surface of the soil, there are a lot of organic matter, and in that organic matter, there are worms. As you dig further into the soil, you notice that there are different type of worms. To have that luscious, productive garden, healthy soil is very important. I'm your host, White Davy, and today we are going to be discussing understanding the worms that are in your garden. So what are the roles of worms in your garden? Worms play a very critical part of having a healthy soil structure. One, they provide aeration for your soil. They help with moisture retention. They also cycle nutrients in the soil. They help you to grow healthy plants, help your plants to fight off pests and pathogens in the soil, and there's so many more benefits, so much more benefits that you get from having worms in your garden. So what are the 3 types of worms that you can find in your garden? And what are the roles of each of these? Let's start with those worms that you found when you were prepping your soil that were on the surface of the garden, eating that organic matter. These type of worms are called epigeic because they live on the surface of the soil. So they will live in the organic matter and they won't burrow down into the soil. Their purpose is to eat the organic matter that is there, break it down into nutrients that your plant can eat, and in the process produce a lot of microbes that your plants can benefit from. And these worms are what is going to break down the material into the simplest form for your plants to absorb the nutrients. Then there are the endogeneic. Now these worms are those common earthworms that you are most likely to see in your garden. They live in the subsoil and in the topsoil, but they do not burrow down deep into the soil, and they feed on any organic matter and on the soil itself and on microorganisms in the soil. These worms, the endogeneic worms, they travel horizontally in the soil. Now, how does that benefit your plants? How does that benefit your garden? Think about these worms going through the soil and they are creating tunnels horizontally in your soil. Now, by doing that, as they eat, they're dropping their litter, they are taking organic matter with them that they're eating, and they are creating tunnels. So along that trail, they are leaving the nutrients behind from their castings, they're leaving the organic matter that they're eating along the way, and they are creating tunnels where water and airflow can travel through the soil horizontally. Now, as we go on to the next worm, we're going to be looking at these endogeneic worms that goes horizontally, and we're going to be looking at the anisic worms that goes vertically, and we're going to see how each of them, even though they're aerating the soil by creating tunnel, how each of their role differs slightly. So as you guessed it, yes, we're going to be looking at the anisic worms next. So anisic worms, these are worms that burrow deep down into your soil, and they travel up to the surface for food and take those foods down deep into the soil where the minerals are. So how does this benefit your plants? Like the endogeneic worms, they are creating tunnels, and in these tunnels they're dropping their castings and spreading nutrients and microorganisms, and as they do so, they are creating those little tunnels going deep down, making it easier for your plant roots to go deep into the soil to find nutrients that would not be readily available if the roots were not able to go deep into your soil. It's like going on a scavenger hunt. As the worm create those tunnels, whether it is going vertically or horizontally, your roots have lots of space to spread out into the soil. When these anestic worms build those vertical tunnels, your roots get to go deeper. When the endogeek worms go vertical, your roots get to spread out. So your roots are spreading out, your roots are going deep. So they can go wherever there is water, the roots can go wherever there is nutrients, and certain nutrients are found deep in soil and not necessarily in the upper layer of your soil. So by having these two different types of worm, you're getting more benefits for your plants. With healthy roots, then your plants will be healthy. Your plants are better able to fight off pathogens. This is why you want to encourage various types of worms in your garden, because by doing so, you reap a better benefit. Now so let's look at the type of worms that can be used as composting worms, because we mentioned the epigeek, which is on the surface feeding on organic matter. Then there's the endogeek that goes vertically in the topsoil and subsoil, and there is the anestic worms that goes deep down into the soil and come up for food. Now the ones that are on the surface, the epigeek, red wrigglers and Indian the blue worms, these worms will be found on the surface of your soil in the organic matter. The endogeek worms are common earthworms that are not good composting worms. And then the anestic worms, these are your night crawlers, and these worms are also good composting worms. So if you are thinking about introducing worms to your garden, there are several factors that you need to consider, several factors that will help you to decide what type of worm you want to introduce to your garden. Some worms are going to be there naturally. For some of you, if your soil is not very healthy or not very rich in organic matter, you will find a few worms or maybe no worms at all, but you can attract worms to your garden. But sometimes these worms are not really in your environment, and so you may have to introduce them to your garden. So how can you decide what type of worm you want in your garden? It depends on the benefit that you want for your worms. So say for example, if your focus is on the organic matter that the worms are going to be breaking down in your garden, then you want to think about red wigglers and Indian blue worm. So if you're thinking about aerating your garden, if you're thinking about having your soil being able to absorb moisture and retain moisture, then you want to think about the anestic worms like the night crawlers. These are the ones that are going to help your plants to grow healthy, strong roots. Now, all of them plays their part. All of them have a similar function, except for where they're tunneling and the direction where they tunnel. But all of them feed on organic matter, they feed on microbes in the soil, and they release castings in the soil. And these castings, along with other factors, help to strengthen your plants. We work hard to grow enough healthy organic food for our families. Why? Because we want our families to be healthy. But if we are doing all that we can to make our family healthy, then it also means that we also need to protect the environment, do we not? Because then we'll be getting healthy in one aspect, but then another aspect we are not very healthy. So we want to consider health on a whole. So how can we do that? In our next video, we are going to be looking at the role of worm farming in waste reduction. So I hope to see you next week. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. If you have any question, you can leave it in the section below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have yourself a wonderful day. Yeah man, a time for grow.